Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 117.
Honest citizens like you protect themselves every day. We talk about it every week on the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. Were these gun owners lucky, or did they have a plan? How should we defend the people we love? We discuss recent examples on the Self-Defense Gun Stories podcast. Put us in your pocket.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 117 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/117. Today's guest is David Powell. Today's sponsors are Scott Shot. Whether you are taking a class as a complete beginner or an experienced, highly competent shooter seeking an NRA instructor certification, Scott Shot classes are comfortable, friendly, and taught with a high instructor-to-student ratio. And by the Self-Defense Gun Stories Podcast, weekly reports and commentary on civilian self-defense. David Powell, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much, bud.
So, David, you're one of the founders of Calfornians opposing gun restrictions. Would you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, sir. It's a gun rights group that was strictly started on a grassroots basis, and we've grown since. We started up, I think, in 2011 and grew up to about 35,000 members.
Wow, 35. So, what was how'd you manage to grow that fast and get that many members?
Well, we did certain things in California that a lot of people don't do. Our gun rights group, what we did when we first started up, we physically actually went to the Capitol, had protests, went to hearings, spoke in opposition. We did everything that people would say, certain other groups just don't do in California. For instance, and I don't mean the bathroom, but the NRA in California has been basically non-existent. So we took it upon ourselves to create a new organization, and that's what we did.
Wow.
I mean, we got pretty big notoriety for doing, which is going to sound crazy, a filibuster in California. And we weren't just like reading from the Bible or anything like that. We had about 2,000 gun owners show up to the Capitol and sit in a hearing, and we kept them in session for 17 hours.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Now that is
we can't
really
do that
good.
anymore.
Oh, okay. They changed the law, or they?
Oh yeah, they
wow.
made that illegal. Yeah.
Nice. We tried to do that in New Jersey, and they just cut everybody off in 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's what they do now in California. And if you can't say why you're for something or why you're against it. It's either you're for it or you're against it. And the second you start speaking, they cut you off.
Wow, that is.
That's insane.
Yeah. Wow. And so 35,000. I think a lot of people think of California as being just completely liberal, like the last gun owner left a year ago. What's it really like?
What's it really like? Okay. Yep. So basically you have two counties that run the entire state. Okay. You have LA County and San Francisco, the Bay Area. It's more than one county, but we'll just count San Francisco as a whole is super liberal. The northern part of the state, except maybe Humboldt County, is very conservative. In fact, about 70% of the state is actually very conservative. The problem is you have over 50% of the population that lives in two counties, and they have the say over the state. Basically, what California has turned into is an oligarchy. And because of that, you have mob rule. And so if 51% of the people say they want one thing, the other 49% of the people, they don't even matter at all. So it's literally mob rule at this point, and there's nothing we could do. We have no voice.
Wow. So what are some of the things that this organization is working on?
Well, sadly, the organization kind of died out after I left California. One of the founding member lost her home recently to the campfire in Chico, and her house completely burned down, and she gave up. One of the other founders actually helped out quite a lot with Gun Owners of California, who is partners with Gun Owners of America, and the organization basically died. It's kind of sad. I lived so close to the Capitol at one point where I could just go there before I went to work and spoke in opposition. But I moved to Nevada for a better job, with a guaranteed job nonetheless, selling firearms now, which is funny.
Nice.
But the organization kind of died, and I really wish someone would have took over the reins and did something with it, but it didn't go anywhere. It's been dead for basically 2 years.
So I've had the experience of living in in New Jersey, it was very restrictive, and Pennsylvania, that was much less restrictive. And, I find two different sets of problems. And I wonder if your experience has been similar. When I was in New Jersey, people would either be indifferent to firearms, and then as they became, enthusiastic about firearms, the most enthusiastic ones would leave, because they want their guns. But then you'd have trouble. You'd have like this attrition period where people would just sort of fade out. But then in the less restrictive state, there's almost apathy, and that people don't think that the threat is there, that it's not coming.
Oh yeah, that's exactly how it is here in Nevada. And people in Nevada, they need to wake the hell up very quickly, because we are now a blue state, which sucks because only one county went blue. We have 17 counties. Nevada has basically turned into East California. That's what we call it. And Vegas runs the entire state. The worst part about this whole thing is everybody treats Vegas, not Carson City, as the capital of Nevada. Whatever they say goes, and no one else's voice throughout the 16 other red counties. Their voice means nothing at all.
Wow. And is that because of the population density, or?
Absolutely. You have a huge population density in one little tiny city. And the rest of the state is, it's kind of deserted, but that doesn't mean that their voice doesn't matter. And it's not fair for states to do this, for California or Nevada or any other state. What we want in Nevada, which would actually help California as well, is to change our voting system here to be like the Electoral College. That way we'll basically never be blue again. Right. And it would be the same with California. It would be the same way. If they ever adopted the same thing, which they won't, because they don't like their Electoral College because Trump won, even though he lost the popular vote only because a bunch of illegals voted. But yeah, they won't do that.
Well, right, and that's that's sort of the paradox, right? Is that the country as a whole does not want to be run the way California is run, where really dense population centers make decisions for rural people. Sure. And so do you think Nevada is going to succeed in changing their election process?
No. And the reason why I said that is because we have a Democratic governor with a Democratic majority, and that will never happen. Like I said, it just won't happen. The Democrats don't like the Electoral College of the United States because they see that as a threat to for votes, and we won't get that here until our state turns red again. There's no way it's going to happen until we turn red. And that's going to be tough, because once states go blue, they usually stay blue.
Right, yeah. So right now, are there gun laws proposed in Nevada that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And they're completely ridiculous. I keep calling it East California, and this is why. They want us to go through private party background checks in Nevada. So even if you have a CCW, you have to go to a gun shop, fill out 4473, and go through another background check just to get that firearm, privately. Nevada, as it stands right now, you could be on the street, buy a gun, and walk away. well, the only thing you really should do is make sure that they are a Nevada resident. You can't, you can't be a California resident and do that. You can't be a California resident by in any other state except California. But we're so close to California that we get these people all the time, and I feel bad for them, but they can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
there's
a
a couple
law,
other.
not a, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, a Californian can come here privately with his own firearm and sell to a gun shop. That's totally fine. But a lot of them don't do that. And I wish they wouldn't. And the reason why is keep those guns in California. California, of all places, needs more guns than any other place.
Yeah, that's really true. So are you involved in any groups down there in Nevada now?
I'm slowly getting involved in it. I've been here for a little bit less than 2 years. I do go to hearings at capitals. We try to speak in opposition here, but they kind of don't let us. We had a huge, our first meeting at the Capitol regarding the party background checks. What's up? $6.99. It's 5.45 by 39. No, it's not. I'm at work, bud.
Oh, that's cool.
Someone now.
Nice.
We went to the Capitol and spoke on, we tried to speak on SB 143. That's the private party background checks for private party transfers. We had almost 1,000 gun owners there, and there was maybe 20 anti-gunners from Moms Demand Action who traveled all the way from California. And I know this because we saw them park with their California plates, and I was a little bit ticked about that. But they let all of them speak, and they let 4 of the 1,000 gun owners speak. Only 4. And then they recessed and didn't tell us when they were coming back. So we couldn't go back because we didn't know what freaking time to go back. And it was not fair. It was absolutely not fair.
And we see like dirty, underhanded tricks like that throughout the country.
And this was totally dirty, underhanded. In the Nevada Constitution, they are supposed to tell the public 3 days before these hearings. They try to keep that from the public, and we found out. So we organized, and that Capitol was packed, and thank God, it got out there. But the Capitol didn't announce that they were supposed to have a legislative meeting, and then they rammed this thing through. They signed that. The governor signed that bill in 2 days after it got written. 2 days.
Oh wow! So it actually passed, and are there lawsuits fighting it, or?
Hopefully, the big problem right now is the way that they passed this law was completely illegal. According to the Nevada Constitution, you cannot modify or change any law within a 3-year period. They did, though. The original law for private party background checks was completely unenforceable, and the state just didn't do it. It was passed by the voters on a ballot, which is shocking, in 2016. So you could go to a gun shop and could do a private party background check, but you didn't need to because it's unenforced. The state wanted the feds to do background checks for private party transfers, but that's not how it works. The feds don't do that. The state does that. Each individual state does it themselves. So the feds don't have the resources or funding or anything to do that. So the feds told the state, do it yourself. So, yeah. So what they did this year in February, they had overturned the law that's only been in effect for 2.5 years. It's supposed to be in effect for 3 years. They literally broke the law, repealing this law that was not in effect for the needed amount of time. So because of that, they're trying to say, well, SB 143 that the governor already signed a couple of weeks ago won't go into effect until January, so it doesn't break the law. Well, they broke the law by repealing the law.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That is
totally dirty and underhanded. And there's so many conflicts of interest with this one law, just this one law. I can't wait to see what all these other laws are going to have because they're ridiculous and unenforceable. The SB 143, for instance, say you are living with a roommate, you're in the military, and you need to deploy. You have guns in the house. He's going to look after your guns when you deploy. You can't leave those guns with him unless you transfer those guns to him privately. through a gun shop, through an FFL, into a 4473 and a background check.
Wow.
Yes. Legally, those would be his guns now, and he could do whatever the hell he wants to them.
Right.
The bad thing is, if you come back and you want your guns back, you guys both have to go back to a gun shop and go through the same process again just to get your guns back. Yeah. So it literally targets the military. It targets anyone that legally owns firearms that has roommates in their house. So when this law goes in effect, literally, this is how it's going to work, and it was explained in great detail. If you have a roommate and you have firearms, regardless if they're in a safe or not, because possession is possession in a house or in a car, it doesn't matter if it's in a locked case. If I go to the grocery store and I leave my firearms at home, I just created a felony by not transferring those firearms in his name. Yeah, literally. Mm-hmm. Well, sorry, it's a misdemeanor the first time. You do it twice, it's a felony.
Mm-hmm. And that's how they create, disqualified people. And we always talk about they're not going to be able to go door to door to door to confiscate everyone's firearms, but they'll keep making the population of eligible people smaller and smaller, and that's one of the ways they do it. They make these laws that people don't know they're breaking, and then all of a sudden there's a whole group of people that aren't qualified, or a whole group of people that never buy guns because they're like, oh, I have a roommate, so I can't own guns. And not
only that, check this out. In SB 43, they kind of snuck this one in there inside the law, that they're creating a central repository for guns. And we all know what that means. It's obvious that they want to have some sort of gun registration, because in Nevada, we don't have that. Nothing ever gets registered to anyone. You pass a background check, you walk. That's it. But they're creating a central repository. Mm-hmm. I think it's on like page 4 in SB 143. I've read the whole thing like a million times. Customers come in asking about it, so I explain that in great detail. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, David, I always ask my guests if there are any books they recommend that every gun owner read. Are there any that you think that everyone should read?
Well, don't want to really say it online, but Patriot's Cookbook, maybe.
All right.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to find.
No, I'm just being serious. I know it's hard to find. I know it's been banned, but it's still out there. And I would just read up on it and keep a copy. Just in case.
Yeah.
I mean, it's freedom of speech. You'd have what you want, and they can't really say that you can. I mean, they could say that, but that's what I would do.
Yeah. So, normally I would put a link to the organization. Should I put a link up to California's opposing gun restrictions, or?
Yeah, it's only on Facebook, and we're highly restricted on there. So it's on facebook.com/Californians opposing gun restrictions.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I thank you very much for being on the show. Any parting words for our listeners?
Well, don't sell your guns. Keep them.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks again for tuning in to episode 117 of the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Show notes page for today's episode is outoforderjameskalita.com/117. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.